I've ridden a total of 8 wooden coasters. I know it doesn't sound like many, but yeah, and it's safe to say I've had quite some journeys with a lot of them. If you've watched the channel for a while, you'll know that I'm not a fan of rough coasters, and wooden coasters are typically quite rough, especially some of the older ones. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to make this video ranking my wooden coasters from best to worst. I mean, worst to best. Yeah. Hello everybody and welcome back to ThrillNet. Today I'm going to be ranking my wooden coasters. Now, I know this is in the top 10 series, which I'm now renaming to the Countdown series. I'm going to be doing more than just top 10s in this series. This series is all about rating talking about some of the best and worst rides in the world and sort of ranking them. Yeah, I'm doing a series on this. If you haven't already, make sure you click the subscribe button below to subscribe and click the bell to enable notifications to make sure you don't miss any of my future videos. But without further ado, let's get into it. Coming in at number 8 as my worst wooden roller coaster, we have Antelope at Gulliver's World in Warrington in Cheshire. Gulliver's World was a childhood park for me. It's what got me into rides and roller coasters, along with Camelot in Lancashire in Charlotte Richards. Yeah, it's one of 2 parks that I visited a lot as a child, and the biggest roller coaster at that park, which isn't saying much because it's not that big, and Gulliver's isn't typically known for its big coasters. I mean, it's a children's park. It's too old for me now, really. Yeah, its biggest coaster there is the Antelope. This is an in-house built wooden coaster. In-house built basically meaning that the wood is from Gulliver's. It's not been shipped from anywhere else, and it's a 1 minute 50 seconds wooden coaster. I'm not exactly sure on the height of this coaster or drop size or anything, because I couldn't really find any statistics on that. But it's somewhere between the height of Blue Flyer at Blackpool Pleasure Beach and Nickelodeon Streak at that park. To me, judging by kind of looking at it, it's around about 50 foot tall, something like that. And yeah, it's 1 minute 50 seconds, and it's got a couple of airtime hills in its layout. The drops obviously aren't that big because obviously, I mean, it's a children's park and it's only 50 foot tall, and it doesn't go below ground or anything like that. You've got a double down in there, a double up as well. You know, some common elements you'll see on wooden coasters. Its layout reminds me a lot of Big Dipper. It's got a lot of flat turns around its layout that separate out some of the drops and the hills. And it's the first big coaster, because, you know, I'd class it as above a kiddie coaster. You know, it's a family coaster, the Antelope. And it's the only family coaster at Gulliver's World now. They used to have another coaster there that was like a wild mouse, but that's now gone to a different park. Yeah, it's the first big coaster I went on. I remember first riding it, I was about 6 or 7 years old, and I was kind of progressing up from like wacky worms and stuff like that. I remember my dad took me on this. I was a bit reluctant to go on it, I was a bit nervous, and I remember literally coming off that thing crying, and yeah, it put me off from doing any big coasters for a while. But that wasn't for the reason I'm going to get onto in a minute, which is why I rate it so low. Because I actually sat near the front of the train on that ride, and you'll probably know where I'm going with this. Yeah, I mean, the kind of it being so tall and the drops and stuff, I just didn't enjoy it. It was a big step up from, like, you know, the Caterpillar wacky worm coasters. We all know that the junior / kiddie coasters that are around. But yeah, 2 years later, something like that, I decided to go and conquer it again, and I enjoyed it. But I visited last year and decided, you know, I'm going to go more towards the back of the train, because on those other rides I'd gone towards the front of the train, and yeah, it hurt. And I say last year, the end of 2018, I went back there. It was kind of well, my sister went there and I went as well because she's not a fan of roller coasters, and she's probably a bit. I think you have to be below a certain age to go on Gulliver's, but she's probably too old now. But back then she wasn't. And I remember, you know what, this coaster, you know, I've done so many big coasters now. Now I'm gonna go straight to the back. I'm gonna do back row because that'll give me the most airtime, of which this coaster doesn't have much of. You're restrained with a lap bar and a seat belt, surprisingly, but you don't get much airtime on this. A bit sort of on the first couple of drops if you're towards the back, but it doesn't have anything else going for it really, this coaster. And oh my word, it hurts. And I'm talking like, if any of you've like rode Big Dipper on the back row, like literally that bad. That's how bad it was, and it's a smaller roller coaster than the Big Dipper. Yep, it hurt, and that's why I just remember, because I was the only one who went on it because my mum stayed with my sister. I waited about 40 minutes for it, and I just remember coming off and thinking, oh, that was such a waste of about 40 minutes of our day. But yeah, because it only has a single train with 4 cars, 4 people in each, so 16 people per ride. And yeah, the reason I'm putting it at the bottom, you might think, you know, I don't remember exactly how it was at the front, but because I have such little memory of it, I'm putting it at the bottom, because it's certainly not as thrilling as the other wooden coasters, apart from one that I might be going on to in a minute. Yeah, and I just don't remember how it rode at the front, so I'm putting it down here at the bottom. It could be interchangeable with number 6, to be honest, because you know what I'm like with wooden coasters. If one seat's rough and one seat's smooth, I'll give the coaster credit, but you know, for being smooth on that seat, with some others that I might be getting onto later, that you know, you'll probably know if you watch this for a while, but I just don't remember exactly how it rode on the other seats. I believe it is smoother at the front, but I can't remember that much because it's such a long time ago since I rode it towards the front of the train. But yeah, another fact about the Antelope, it was designed by Allott and Lomax, and yeah, that's just another fact I thought I'd drop in there. Coming in then at number 7, we have Blue Flyer at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. This is a Philadelphia Toboggan Coasters wooden coaster, and the only coaster on this list I class as a junior coaster. Unlike Antelope, it's a pretty smooth coaster. However, it just doesn't give any airtime, and as you'd imagine for a family coaster, it's a pretty simple layout. You climb the lift hill, you turn around, you've literally got 3 dips into a tunnel, turn around into this station. It's a pretty oval shaped layout, to be honest. Just a 1 lap. And yeah, I couldn't find again any statistics for the height of this, but I believe it's around 30 foot tall, something like that. It's 1099.1 foot long. It has a duration of a minute, and yeah, that's pretty much all there is to say about it really. Finally then, something I thought I'd tell you. Originally between 1934 when it opened and 2010 it was known as Zipper Dipper. However, in 2010 when Pleasure Beach opened Nickelodeon Land, the name was changed to Blue Flyer as it is known today. Pretty much then, Blue Flyer is perfectly smooth, however it's just not thrilling at all, which is why I rate it down here as basically the 2nd worst wooden coaster I've ridden, and 7th best wooden coaster I've ridden. Coming in there at number 6, we have another family wooden roller coaster, and that is Nickelodeon Streak, again at Blackpool Pleasure Beach in Blackpool, Lancashire, in England, in the United Kingdom. So yeah, this is a roller coaster built by Charles Page. It's got a simple wooden out and back layout, so you leave the station, you turn, you go up the lift hill, and you reach a total height of 61 foot. You then turn around, you go down a few dips and over some airtime hills, which don't give a ton of airtime really. but then you reach kind of the end of Nickelodeon land near the Revolution, which is next to it, that being an aerodynamics, the shuttle loop coaster. You turn around and then you proceed back towards the station, down some smaller dips which do give some nice airtime if you sat towards the back actually. And yeah, you then turn around back into the station. This is the first of the wooden coasters on this list that I'd say I actually enjoy riding. It is quite thrilling, it's a perfect family coaster and very good for those who are just starting to get into some of the bigger coasters. Out of the coasters that I'd say are kind of big coasters at Pleasure Beach that aren't junior coasters, I'd say that this is probably the best coaster to start on. So yeah, throughout this coaster you reach a speed of 35 miles per hour, so it's got some nice speed to it. The ride's 1 minute 44 seconds long, and again this is another ride that actually had a name change when Nickelodeon Land opened in 2010. Originally the ride was called Roller Coaster, but then it was painted orange when Nickelodeon Land opened in 2010 and renamed Nickelodeon Streak. Another interesting fact is that before Roller Coaster existed as it was known at the time, another roller coaster called the Velvet Coaster existed, and when that was demolished and Nickelodeon Street was being built, they actually reused some parts of the Velvet Coaster for some parts of Roller Coaster, particularly the lift hill. Roller Coaster itself actually opened in 1933, so yeah, 1 year before Zipper Dipper, as it was known at the time, opened. Coming in then at number 5, we have the oldest wooden roller coaster on this list, that being Big Dipper, again at Blackpool Pleasure Beach in Blackpool in the United Kingdom. This ride was built by William Strickler and opened in 1923, similar to Nickelodeon Streak and Blue Flyer. It has an out and back layout as it's known. You pretty much leave the station, turn round, go up a couple of lift hills actually. They've got like a small lift hill and then you actually kind of go around a couple of turns into the main lift hill, which if you've been on the ride you'll know is one of the slowest lift hills on a coaster. When you reach the top you turn around, you go down and drop over a few airtime hills and then pretty much turn around and go some more airtime hills back to the station. However, this layout is a bit more interesting. You have got a couple of turns. I know I compared that to like the Antelope. You got a few flat turns towards sort of the middle of the layout that you kind of go around, and you get some nice laterals on them as well because the train is going fairly fast around them. But yeah, this is 60 foot tall, this ride, so 1 foot taller than Nickelodeon Streak. However, the drops are noticeably larger when you're on the ride. You do also get, I'd say, more airtime on Big Dipper than Nickelodeon Streak, especially towards the back of the train. However, there is one airtime hill towards the start of the train in particular that you actually get pushed against a lap bar, notably if you sat towards the front. One slight disappointment with this ride is that it can be quite rough on wheel seats. Wheel seats being at the front and back of each car on the train. Big Dipper features 3 cars with 4 rows each, allowing for 24 riders per train, and the middle 2 rows of those cars are not on a wheel. However, the front and back row of each car are on wheels, because that's how the trains on the wooden coasters and most coasters are designed. And because you're on a wheel, obviously you can feel it kind of going over the track, which makes the ride rough. It wasn't as bad a few years ago, but in the last year or so it has got notably worse. I did do a wheel seat once in 2020 on Big Dipper, and I found it not to be quite as rough as in 2019. However, in 2019, towards the back of the train, the thing was just unbearable. Literally, you could just feel your whole inside shaking. It was that rough. The first drop of the ride in particular, is notably very rough. But this is actually the longest ride so far. It's got a length of 3,300 foot, lasting a total duration of 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Finally, another interesting fact is that the Big Dipper was actually extended in 1935 to offer a longer ride experience, and that was done because Blackpool basically had acquired the land by that point. To the part of the park we now refer to as South Park, where rides such as Revolution, the Big One and Icon can be found. So the Big Dipper is kind of the station. I'd say it's mostly South Park, with the station kind of being on the border between what we refer to as North Park, where rides such as Grand National, River Caves, Valhalla, where all those are located. Big Dipper's kind of on the boundary between that and South Park. As you'll know if you've been to Pleasure Beach, the entrance to the ride is on kind of that path that goes through the middle of the park, where you can also find rides such as Wallace and Gromit and Infusion. But yeah, the Big Dipper, you'll notice if you've been, it now goes right down to South Park, to the edge of the park where Burger King is. So yeah. And who would have guessed it? At number 4, we have the final of the 4 wooden roller coasters that remain at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, and that is Grand
Error. Ranking my wooden coasters from worst to best. X unexpectedly crashed. Yes, this is yet another error in a ThrillNet video. As I'm sure you already know, ThrillNet, also known as Ben, is well known for making errors in his videos. Yes, he's quite clumsy if you ask me. I mean, like, remember in his Blackpool Pleasure Beach 2019 closing weekend vlog when he met theme park mad for the first time and embarrassed himself in front of them by mixing up Infusion and Icon?
Yes, Icon. Oh! Sorry guys! How can you get those? Right, well you can
I know lol. How could he get that torture machine of a Vekoma SLC mixed up with that silky smooth Mack multi-launched coaster? Like, is he even an enthusiast at all? Oh, and do you remember in the first episode of his Planet Coaster Seaside Amusement Park series when he claimed that there is a Maurus-owned spinning coaster known as Sonic Spinball located at Blackpool Pleasure Beach?
And then in the centre here we have a Marathon spinning coaster, similar to the likes of Sonic Spinball at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. What am I saying here? Alton Towers, not Blackpool Pleasure Beach. They don't have a marathon at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, but this is a Blackpool Pleasure Beach style park. Alton Towers, they have, and it's not called Sonic Spinball either. It's called Spinball Whizzer.
Yes, like that's just a joke. Not only was he referring to a name for a coaster that is no longer valid, there isn't even a Maurus-owned spinning coaster at Blackpool Pleasure Beach in the first place, haha. It's no wonder he's never been in a relationship in his entire life. Like, I mean, being a girl myself, I can tell you that us girls do not like boys who are clumsy, therefore it's no surprise that none of the girls he has ever had feelings for have felt the same way as him. To be fair, he's not bad looking or anything. Actually, I think he looks pretty hot now he's had that good trim, but unless he stops being so clumsy and starts thinking more about what he's about to say before he says it, he hasn't got a chance with anyone, ha ha ha.
Well, it hurts me to kind of have to say this, but I guess what she said is true. I mean, another mistake in a video, but I mean, I suppose, you know, the important thing is we try again, you know, we learn. Coming in then at number 4, we have Megaphobia at Oakwood Theme Park in Pembrokeshire in South Wales. Now, Megaphobia is a Custom Coasters International wooden coaster that opened in the park in 1996. It was actually the last wooden roller coaster to be built in the UK before Wicker Man, which opened in 2018. Yeah, this was the last wooden roller coaster to be built before Wicker Man, after the Antelope, which, as I mentioned previously, opened a year earlier in 1995. So yeah, It's at Oakwood Theme Park, it's towards the front of the park, and the thing that makes this coaster compared to the coasters that I've talked about beforehand is the airtime. The majority of the wooden coasters I've mentioned so far don't have a whole lot of airtime. However, Megaphobia does have quite a bit of airtime, especially when you're coming off the first drop. As you'll see from your POV now, me getting whipped out that seat. You know, as you come over the top of the drop, you are absolutely, literally stood up in the train nearly. And there's a fair bit of airtime around the ride as well. Now, I thought I'd just mention, and I know this is going to sound weird because I've kind of praised this ride so far. And like, I'm sorry to say this, but this is going to come as a bit of a shock, I know, but I think Megaphobia is overrated. I think enthusiasts rate it way too highly. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a really good running coaster and that, but it's just so overrated. Like, people saying there's like 16 seconds of airtime. No, there's not. There's a lot of airtime, but there's coasters on this list with more airtime than Megaphobia, I'm telling you now. Not to mention, it's also a bit rough as well. When you're hitting some of the bottom of those drops, and it's, you know, it's expected from a coaster that's that old, it is a bit shaky, even on non-wheel seats I've noticed. And I didn't notice it. I've been thrown into that lap bar before, and part of that is because of the airtime, but it happens so much, and sometimes it's actually kind of painful, I'm not going to lie. It's quite a brutal coaster. Another thing, I do think it's a bit sluggish in some sections of the ride. Don't get me wrong, it's probably the fastest of the wooden coasters so far, but as you're going to hear from the coasters I'm about to talk about in my top 3, they're a lot faster than Megaphobia, or they feel like that throughout the layout. And Megaphobia can be a bit sluggish at times, going round some of the, you know, over some of the hills. But don't get me wrong, they give lots of airtime, but a lot of the airtime hills are quite large hills, so the ride does have a bit of a sluggish feel to it. It's nothing major, but something else I thought I'd mention. But I just think it's a bit overrated, really. Don't get me wrong, it's a really good coaster, and part of it might be because, you know, especially in Wales, there's not many coasters in Wales, and to be honest, it's one of the best coasters in Wales. Like, I'd take Speed over it, but after that, I'm sure many would agree it's at least the second best coaster in Wales, and many would say it's the best. You know. But just people saying like it blows Wickerman out of the water. I know, I'm sorry, Mark Lewis, if you're watching. He's a big Megaphobia enthusiast from Wales. Oakwood's his local park, and he's ridden the ride loads of times for charity events and stuff. But yeah, he'd probably have something to say to me right now. But as I said, this is my opinion, and he's entitled to his own opinion. If he loves the ride, that's fine by me, and I can understand why he does love it. I just personally think that the ride's a bit overrated, but don't get me wrong, it's really good. But yeah, so as I said, the ride opened in 1996. It's 2,956 foot long, reaches speeds of 48 miles per hour, and it's 85 foot tall. And that's all I have to really say about Megaphobia. On to number 3. At number 3 then, we have Grand National. Now this is another ride that I've had quite a journey with, and that's also to do with it also being renowned for being quite rough. So back in 2014, I rode Big Dipper for the first time when I went to Blackpool Pleasure Beach, kind of for the first time since I was very young. Again, that was one of my first big coasters because, as you will know from when I talked about the Antelope before, I wasn't really into big coasters when I was younger. And when I was, how old would I have been? Like 12 years old in 2014. That's sort of when I started to get into them more, having only really done the Antelope and a couple of other rides beforehand, really, that were that big. But, you know, I went to Blackpool and I decided I'm going to conquer some of these, like, family coasters. The first one of those being Big Dipper, so that ride does have a special place in my heart, which is one of the reasons why I've rated it where I have in the list. A year later I decided, you know what, I'm going to take things up a bit. I'm going to conquer Grand National. Those of you who've ridden Grand National will know it's a bit more intense than Big Dipper in terms of the airtime. and it has a few more drops and stuff. They are a bit steeper. I'd say they're actually smaller than the drops you'd find on Big Dipper. I wouldn't say that any of the Grand National drops are as big as some of the Big Dipper drops, which are quite large considering how tall it is. But yeah, I went on the ride, and oh boy, I found it rough. In contrast to Big Dipper, Grand National is believed to have got a bit smoother over the past few years. There was a bad incident in 2017 where I believe someone broke their neck or something, so that's probably, they were an older person, but that's probably why they've kind of done some maintenance, I guess. This is only speculation. I don't know any facts for sure, but I'm guessing they've emphasised sort of maintenance on that ever since that, to make it as kind of smooth as possible, with there being kind of pressure from that incident. But yeah, I rode it in 2015 and I was like, I'm never going on that again. It was so rough, so uncomfortable, pretty much like Big Dipper was on back row last year when I rode it. And yeah, I must have been on a wheel seat on Grand National. In a way, it's harder to get wheel seats, non-wheel seats, sorry, on Grand National to get a smooth ride on it. But then it's not. Grand National has 3 cars per train, with 3 rows per car, meaning 18 riders per train, pretty much. But the middle row of each car obviously is a non-wheel seat, so there's only 6 seats on the train. Each train, sorry, with that are non-wheel seats. However, unlike Big Dipper, Grand National has air gates. It's not a first come first served basis. The ride does have air gates, so basically that allows you to choose your row rather than when they open the gates having to run and find a non-wheel seat, which is how it is on Big Dipper, because that ride doesn't feature air gates, unfortunately. But yeah, so as long as you count the rows right, you do the maths, you can avoid wheel seats. The interesting thing about Grand National is that it's a Mobius loop coaster. It was built by Philadelphia Toboggan Coasters. That's who manufactured it. But it's a Mobius loop. Basically, it is one coaster, essentially. I know there's a lot of debate. Is Grand National one coaster, or is it 2 coasters? Same applies with Steeplechase. Is it 1 coaster? Is it 3 coasters? Personally, I count them both as 1 coaster due to the similarities in the layout, and with Grand National it being 1 single loop. But yeah, how it works is you got 2 stations, or the sides to the station. Essentially, the exit to one station links to the entrance to another station. So when you ride Grand National, it means you end up on the other side of the station to where you started on, or the other station, should I say. So basically, when you ride Grand National, you only actually ride half the layout of the ride, and that's how it sort of works. But the 2 sides of the track kind of follow the same circuit and are separated by some wood in the centre, which basically connects them together. So basically, each side of the station is dispatched at the same time, and you're basically racing against another train on the ride. However, both sides basically offer the same ride experience, apart from the pre-lift section, which does vary on the sides. One goes kind of like a left turn, and one goes around a right turn, but then they join up, before the lift hill. This ride is 3,302 foot long, so slightly longer than Big Dipper, and that's when you count half the layout. Reaches speeds of 40 miles per hour. It lasts 2 minutes 20 seconds, and it's 62 foot tall, so it's the tallest of the wooden coasters at Pleasure Beach. But yeah, on to how so far I've kind of discussed how I didn't like it. Basically, last year, a good friend of mine, Josh from Theme Park Mads, along with a couple of others, convinced me to go back on this ride and said, as long as you ride it on a non-wheel seat, and pointed out that it has got smoother, them having rode it frequently when they visited the park, said it has got smoother, so as long as you ride on a non-wheel seat, you'll be absolutely fine. And I tried it second to back row on a non-wheel seat, and it was brilliant. I really enjoyed it. It gives some really nice airtime. It's this ride's all about small airtime hills, and it has that kind of relentless feeling to it. Loads of small airtime hills, one after the other, with some flat sections that like turns as well, kind of separating like each kind of set of airtime hills on the ride out, and they give some really good laterals because basically the ride's nice and close to the ground pretty much. So yeah, and it just gives more airtime than any coaster on the list so far, and that's why I rate it where I do. Coming in then at number 2, we have the Great Coasters International Wooden Coaster Wicker Man at Alton Towers. Now, this opens in 2018. However, it had to open a week late because, you know, I mean, the Beast from the East happened. And while that's going back now, what different times we live in, because we've just had the warmest spring on record, and we're in lockdown. So yeah, this is a Great Coasters International Wooden Coaster themed to the Wicker Man films. So yeah, and the story's basically the same. There's basically this big ceremony happening, and people are getting burnt in the Wicker Man or something like that. I kind of haven't watched the film, so I don't really understand what's going on, but that's what I get from the pre-show. But yeah, the ride experience starts in the queue because, I mean, this ride has theming. Yeah, it's like the first ride on this list to actually have theming. But will it be the last? You'll have to find out. But yeah, you've got this massive Wicker Man statue that's 60 foot tall in the middle of the ride. And the ride interacts with that. I believe it's 3 times. It passes through the structure. And when it passes through the structure, there's like mist effects in there, there's fire effects in there, and then on the shoulders of the Wicker Man, you have real fire, and you also have some fire torches around the ride. But the fire isn't always on. They used to have a lot of mist, but they've toned that down because I believe it was causing problems with the ride or something, or they've just turned it down because there was too much of it. But yeah, the ride experience starts in the queue. You have a big Wicker Man sign, and the queue pretty much goes around the whole ride. There's bunting for this celebration of people getting burnt or whatever. And then when you reach the pre-show, the Wicker Man or Wicker Duck, shout out to Jake from Theme Park Jake for that one. We really need to do a collab or something soon because, yeah, you're a legend. But yeah, you enter the pre-show, and there's this Scottish man that basically tells you the story, and I believe it's like, yeah, projection mapping. It's a projection mapping cutscene, and no, not cutscene. What am I on about? Pre-show, and then basically partway through the pre-show, this curtain lifts up, and there's this giant Wicker Man there that's projected onto. And it looks really good. It is my favourite pre-show for any ride. Like, it's insane. It's not too long, so you're not like getting bored and falling asleep. You know, it's to the point. It's about a minute in length. It's loud as well. Like before the pre-show, you got this massive like really low like rumble effects and some more like rumbling effects throughout the pre-show. And you know, it's moving, that pre-show. It really is, like. And it's quite scary as well. I mean, I don't like horror and I'm not scared of it, but for little kids, you know, it's a lot. And I believe you can actually skip the pre-show as long as, like, if you ask a staff member, you can skip it. You then go into a nice station, and there's all rock work through this indoor part, by the way. Yeah, I should say it's indoors. And that was done by Universal Rocks, who've done a lot of rock work on, you know, a lot of world-class rides. I wouldn't say Wicker Man's a world-class ride, but it's definitely a Europe-class ride for the theme. But I'd say, to be honest, the theming is probably world-class. But yeah, we'll get onto the coaster itself in a minute, which isn't quite world-class. But it's a very good coaster, hence why I'm rating it so highly. You got some more fire effects in the station. You choose your air gates. I recommend going towards the back of the train, and there you go. You go up this wonky looking lift hill because basically towers struggle for planning permission, so obviously all their rides are compact, as is Wicker Man. So compact so that the brake run goes underneath the lift hill, and the lift hill's so close to it that if they built it all at one angle, it basically wouldn't there wouldn't be enough room. So yeah, they had to kind of change the angle part way up, and it's noticeable when you're on the ride as well. You get to the top, you go through this tunnel with like mist, smoke effects, and you turn around into the drop, and there you are. You've got numerous airtime hills throughout the ride. You don't get loads of airtime, although you get more if you're towards the back. Yeah, but some airtime hills, and you've also got some fancy elements like triple downs. You've got a lot of turns that pull a lot of laterals, and it's just a really good ride. I wouldn't say this is an airtime focused ride, as a lot of the GCIs aren't. You know, it's not like Grand National where it's like airtime hill, airtime hill, airtime hill. This ride has more variety, but I like that. This ride is about the speed. This ride's very fast, especially when you're on the back. It warms up throughout the day, so I recommend going on it later on, although sometimes it's quieter in the morning. Yeah, if it's quiet in the morning, I mean, do it. But a good way to do it, because it gets such big queues still, because, you know, it's still the new ride at Alton Towers technically. I mean, unless you're classed in Dungeons a new ride. And Gangster Granny, which has been delayed to 2021. But yeah, Gangster Granny will kind of be the new ride then. So that'll probably be taking away some of Wicker Man's queues. But yeah, it's just a really good ride. I recommend towards the back. For me, to enjoy Wicker Man to its full potential, I need to be on towards the back of the train. I feel it can be a bit slow on the front, especially considering it's not very airtime focused. But on the back, you get a lot more airtime and it's a lot faster. This ride has a big difference between the front and the back, and you need to be on the back of it to get that full experience. So yeah, pretty much you've got bank turns, you've got a turnaround, which, you know, I kind of like. A lot of people don't, but it breaks up the ride a bit, you know. And it flies around there as well, so you get some nice laterals, as you do on Grand National. And then at the end of the ride, you go into this room that doesn't have a lot in it, and you can't see anything. It's actually the maintenance shed. You got like a couple of fire smoke effects, some smoke blasts out that absolutely stinks the ride out. Yeah, the smells in this ride are quite strong, especially before the pre-show as well, although I do like them. It really does add to it. I do like them, to be honest. And then you're back in the station, and that's the end of the ride. Really good ride, and definitely deserves to be at this position. But yeah, the ride itself is actually 2,600. Oh, I've made another mistake again. 2,608.3 foot long. 0.3 foot long, yeah. Which is a reasonable length, although the train does maintain its speed well, so the ride's actually not that long. Some people say they reckon it's a bit short, but I think it's a good length, to be honest. I don't think it's too short. Could be longer, but it's reasonable. It's got a 72.2 foot drop. It's not 72.2 foot tall. As I'm sure many of you will know, Alton Towers can't build behind tree level, so they have to dig down, which is what they also did with Wicker Man. So I don't know how tall the coaster is itself, but the drop's 72.2 foot, which is reasonable for a family coaster. It's definitely an intense family coaster as well, Wicker Man, because of the airtime and laterals, and even the positive G-forces in some places as well. You reach speeds of 43.6 miles per hour, and as I said, it maintains that very well throughout the ride. And it's 3 minutes 30 seconds long, but as I said, the coaster segment isn't that long. A lot of that is, you know, you got the end maintenance shed bit, which are in for about 30 seconds, especially if the train in front of you in the station hasn't dispatched yet. And it's quite a long lift hill as well, and that all takes up time. Yeah. That's a really good ride, Wicker Man. Anyway then, on to number one. And finally, at number one, and a well-deserved winner, or my favourite wooden coaster, should I say, is Woden Timber Coaster at Europa Park. My number one wooden roller coaster. Now, what can I say about this ride? First of all, I'd like to point out that it's also manufactured by Great Coasters International, similar to Wicker Man, same manufacturer, and a lot of the elements of this ride are comparable, hence why I rate it so highly anyways. But, you know, this takes Wicker Man a step further and turns, or, well, not really, because it was built before Wicker Man, it opened in 2012. It takes what Wicker Man had as being a family coaster, you know, kind of makes use of more intense forces, and you know, it gives what is overall a thrilling, very thrilling experience, should I say. You know, it's not a family coaster, this is a thrill coaster, and it's the largest of the wooden coasters on the list. And yeah, you can probably guess with all of this why I rate it so highly. It's also a very smooth experience, like Wicker Man. I forgot to mention, these newer GCI coasters are not rough like the old wooden coasters. They are quite smooth. With them being wooden coasters, they do have a noticeable rattle to them, but it doesn't make the ride rough in any way. So yeah, Woden Timber Coaster is located in the Iceland themed area of Europa Park, and it's themed to Norse mythology, and the queue line is very similar, or it's not similar, but you know, comparable to Valhalla, because Valhalla at Blackpool Pleasure Beach is also a ride themed to Norse mythology. However, Woden is themed to sort of the goddess of death and hell and stuff like that. And I know, what a coincidence, because I had the most humiliating experience I've ever had when queuing for Woden. But I'm not going to talk about that now because I'll be here all day. Go and watch in the top right up here. It's in the card, my experience of Europa Park, to find out why. But yeah, what a coincidence. Yeah. But yeah, so you enter the queue line, and it kind of goes over the coaster, and it's a very, very, very well themed queue line, which is one of the reasons why I rate this wooden coaster so highly. Being visually impaired, I do struggle to see some of the indoor theming because some of the indoor areas are quite dark, but there's enough that I can see to be able to appreciate what's there. And to be honest, it probably is the best queue line that I've seen for a roller coaster. Whether it's the best in the world might be debatable, but in terms of what I've seen, it is, I'd say, the best for roller coaster. So a lot of this queue line, and this applies to the extended queue line, on shorter days and quieter days this won't be open, but on busier days it is. A lot of this queue line's indoor in sort of this like cavern themed area where you've got like mist, like smoke, projection mapping, projection theming. It just makes use of everything. Water effects. You got like all crystals in the walls to give this like cavern-like effect, and you got all like kind of eerie sounds and like kind of moving like scenery as well. Like the ceiling kind of moves to like simulate the train going over, and there's this bit with like hammers hitting wood as well, and you can like touch the wood kind of thing and feel the wood like vibrate. It's really good. And then outdoor, halfway through the queue line, you've actually got a toilet. I know, one of the only roller coasters in the world, I bet, to feature a toilet halfway through the queue line. It is one of those, like, if you've been to places, one of those, like, toilets you pay for here in the UK. I don't believe it's the best quality, it's quite small, but I know, and I think more coasters should have that, you know, because, I mean, who wants to be leaving a queue line because they want to go to the toilet and they're desperate or whatever, they've queued for ages, you know, that's the last thing you want to be doing. More parks need to put toilets in queue lines, because then you can just go and then you don't lose your place in the queue. So yeah, but yeah, and then when you get to the station itself, which isn't the best theme to be honest, I do think Wicker Man station is much better themed. You got these like heads, and when the train leaves the station, they like follow the train, and then when the train's coming back in, they like follow it back into the station, so that's quite a cool effect. And then when you get on the ride itself, there's not a ton of theming on the ride, like in the case of Wicker Man, like there's no big structures you pass through, but it's a really good wooden roller coaster, and like Wicker Man is as well actually, it's very low to the ground, and it maintains its speed really well. This ride is very, very fast. It's by far the fastest wooden roller coaster on the list. 62 miles per hour this ride reaches, which is incredible for a wooden coaster. And oh boy, you feel that as you're going around the ride. You know, it goes like over some paths, under some paths. It interacts with Atlantica Super Splash in the Portugal area, which is next to Iceland, as well as Blue Fire. Blue Fire passes under it as well. But yeah, it's just a really good ride. You get to the top and there's this big like fire torch and that goes off, and then there's also a sound timer as well. It's part of the theming that you see, and you kind of go around this corner, bearing in mind you've got a bit of a drop on the pre-drop section. You go around that corner and wow, you fly down that first drop. Probably my favourite moment on the ride, and you are flung out the seats, I'll tell you. This is a very airtime focused coaster. You know, it's little pops of ejector really as you go around. It's not got tons of airtime, but this is definitely, you are flung out your seat and you're out there until you hit the bottom of that drop. Like, my favourite moment on a wooden coaster, that is, I'm going to say it now, and it's a very big drop as well. Pretty much takes you to the bottom of the ride, and then from that point onwards, you're pretty close to the ground, going around some bank corners, over a few airtime hills, and it's relentless again. I'm going to use that word again. This ride is relentless. You are flung to the side round some of the turns with such strong ejector. It's got some good, laterals. Oh, wow, another mistake. But yeah, you know, you get flung to the side because of bits of laterals. You know, so much lateral G-force on this coaster. Obviously, you get negative Gs from the air times, and you get some nice positives as well. But yeah, it's a really intense wooden coaster, by far the most intense wooden coaster on this list, and it's just so fast. And then you reach the end, you go through a maintenance shed which isn't pitch black this time, and back into the station, and that's the ride. Yeah, you know, it's incredible, and it's the only, well, Wicker Man maybe, one, like say this and Wicker Man, they're in my top coasters. I can't remember off the top of my head where this lies in my top 10 Woden, but it's definitely in my top 10. And I'm not, yeah, this is definitely in, and Wicker Man like this as well, or not worked out, but this is definitely a top 10 coaster for me. It's just incredible, it really is. So the ride is 3,444.9 foot long, it's 131 foot tall, so very tall for a wooden coaster. It's a, you know, it's a huge wooden coaster, this is. As I said, the roller coaster is 62.1 miles per hour, and that's the top speed. It lasts 3 minutes 25 seconds, so again it's a very long ride, similar to Wicker Man, and the coaster layout for this is, you know, there's a lot more kind of intense coaster sections to this, like the fast coaster bit's quite a bit longer than Wicker Man's, and yeah, and you get positive Gs of up to 3.5, so that's not really high, but it's more about the laterals and negative Gs on this. But as I said, you do get nice positive Gs, and you definitely feel those 3.5 Gs as you're going round the ride. And that brings this video to an end then, ranking my wooden coasters from worst to best. You know, as you can tell, there's a big range in how I rate wooden coasters. If they're really rough, like Antelope, like some of the worst coasters are ridden. But, you know, Antelope's one of the worst coasters are ridden. But, you know, things like Woden, they're within my top coasters. So it really does depend in terms of how I rate a wooden coaster, how rough it is in particular. You know, as well as the airtime, because that's what those coasters are about, and just speed really. That's kind of how I judge them really, you know, and really if anything it's how smooth they are, because you know what I'm like with rough rides, I do not like rough coasters. So, you know, if a coaster's rough, even if it has everything else, you know, it's never going to be in my top coasters. But yeah, thank you for watching. As I said, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to enable notifications so you don't miss any future videos like this and any of my other future videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.